Now, this really shocked me, Andy, because here this board appeared to be a kangaroo court operation. I believe there was one complaining witness, at least that's what you showed in the film, and the rest were all patients of the doctor who were extremely supportive. And so the board split the baby. They said, well, we're going to suspend your license, but we're going to stay it. That accent was a little bit hard to understand. And what that meant was that Dr. Jemsek got this item in his file, and you report that very soon thereafter, Blue Cross sent him a letter saying that they were canceling the contract with him so that he could no longer see patients who were covered by Blue Cross. Oh, and by the way, we are suing you for $100 million. And that led to bankruptcy for Dr. Jemsek. Now, this is the kind of punitive behavior that really shocks me, and I can't find any rationale for it. Why would a company like Blue Cross feel that they need to drive this man out of business and prevent him from seeing patients? It's one thing to say, we won't cover it. It's another thing to use their heavy hand and their gaggles of lawyers to essentially punish this man.
I don't work for the insurance companies. I can't answer that question. I really can't. It's mind-boggling. There's many things that I've encountered in the making of this film that I just cannot grasp.
Mm-hmm.
You know, both from a standpoint of compassion, but also from economics.
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm. So. Where are we now? Do you see any potential for legislation to protect doctors who work in this field? Do you see any potential for breakthroughs before the Infectious Disease Society or others to review this and come up with a more reasonable and humane approach?
Yeah, good questions. And relevant questions. Actually, the state of Connecticut recently enacted a law that was just signed by the governor there that protected physicians who were treating chronic Lyme disease. And this was partly, I think, I think our film actually helped impact that legislation. Our film has been shown to legislators and is really bringing the issue out of the dark and bringing the darkness into the light, so to speak. So there is change. Connecticut is not the only state. There are a couple other states that do protect physicians. And really that needs to be a conversation, negotiation that a patient needs to have with their physician. And the idea that they're being told, if not by the HMOs and insurance companies, how to treat their patients, they're being told by essentially courts of law that they can't treat, that they're outside the bounds of medicine for treating effectively really is hard to swallow. Something about the IDSA, I talked earlier about the Infectious Disease Society, who was under investigation by the Attorney General's office in Connecticut. They agreed to reconvene a guideline writing panel, and none of which the panel members could have conflicts of interest. So it seemed to be a sort of coup. And right now, they've actually chosen the panel. But what they also did was they said that because of the question of conflicts of interest, we can't have anybody on that panel who earns, I think the number was $10,000, more than $10,000 a year from treating Lyme disease. So that excluded all the community-based physicians, the experts, the ones who are most knowledgeable about how to treat Lyme. So they're still being barred from the process. Mm-hmm. And right now, this month, at the end of this month, July 30th in Washington, there's going to be a hearing. That panel is going to be hearing testimony from patient advocacy groups as well as physicians and scientists. and they are reconsidering the guidelines. The IDSA says it probably won't change because they never admitted they never admitted that there were any problems with the guidelines in the first place, and because the people on the guidelines writing panel now are not people who are experts in any shape or form in the issue of Lyme disease. They're probably going to just sort of accept the orthodoxy, the sort of kingpins that already exist in around the issue. Mm-hmm. So we'll see. It's science is being challenged right now in court in at the end of the month in Washington, and we'll see if any real change happens.
Andy, did your sister recover?
She did. She finally was properly diagnosed and got treatment. She has relapses every now and then. People who go on to have chronic Lyme disease end up very often having to deal with this issue for the long term, if not forever. Mm-hmm. And it becomes something that can be, at best, managed. And so the question of cure is something that really, we have to be cautious about. And anybody who's been in the thick of this knows that it's folly to think that at later stages that this illness can be cured with 2 to 4 weeks of antibiotics, mm-hmm. which is what the Infectious Disease Society of America will have us believe.
You told me before we started talking on the program here that George W. Bush was diagnosed with Lyme disease and that you made some inquiries about his treatment and recovery.
Well, okay. We had heard through one of our sources, a physician who treats Lyme disease, that George Bush, this was back when he was president, had Lyme disease or had suffered from Lyme disease. And
from that chronic brush clearing in Crawford?
Well, it could have been. Who knows? He was an avid hunter.
Well, it's mountain biking, too. He used to ride mountain bikes all over the place.
That's right. And Lyme disease is a big problem in Texas, contrary to popular belief, again. And it sort of made sense because if you looked at video of George Bush before he was the president, back when he was running for governor of Texas, he could string sentences together. He was actually fairly articulate. And I always wondered when he was our president, how could this man, what's going on here? And then having heard that he had Lyme disease, it sort of made sense. People with Lyme disease very often have cognitive problems, word retrieval issues, dyslexic kinds of speech. So he fit into that sort of pattern. It made sense. It's obviously not the only thing that explains it, but it sort of made sense. Okay, he has Lyme disease. So we sent a fax to the press office, and we couldn't say that we heard that George Bush had Lyme disease because we couldn't reveal our source. We just said we heard he was an advocate for the issue or something like that, and we'd like to talk to him. We never got a response back, but 2 weeks later, I think it was, the White House released a statement saying that George Bush had indeed had Lyme disease, but that he was treated and cured.
Do we know when?
Do we know when?
The time frame of when they have acknowledged that he contracted it.
He said that they said that he had contracted it over a year prior. Mm-hmm. And that he had been treated since then and was cured. Now, the interesting thing is if it was over a year ago, why wasn't that shown or announced in the last year's announcement about the president's health? Obviously, it seems to me that they wanted to preempt any kind of disclosure about his Lyme disease. And anybody who knows anything about Lyme disease also knows that you just don't get cured so quickly unless it's treated in the very early stages. Mm-hmm. So the idea that he was out of that he was out of danger is probably not the case. And I suspect he's if he's probably still suffering from symptoms and may still be treated.